before we sign off today, we got to talk a little bit about the Marvel Cinematic Universe television, I guess, mindset and a shift in mentality from Kevin Feige. And we got to talk about Daredevil Born Again. So there is some big news that hit the internet waves. Um, First off, Daredevil Born Again. Marvel has let go all of the writers and directors for the upcoming series, and it's going to get an entire creative reboot. Matt Murdock, played by Charlie Cox, still set to star. We're going to get Charlie Cox, okay? But it seemed that Marvel didn't like the way the show was operating. They thought it wasn't working because the show was a more of a legal procedure, according to a report that did not resemble the Netflix's action-heavy, violence-heavy series. It also said, according to this report, that Charlie Cox would not have appeared in costume until episode 4. So we'll just start off with Daredevil Born Again. What was your reaction to this news when it popped up on your Twitter timeline?
I was initially shocked. I was and nervous. I definitely was like, wow, writer strike is over. We're revamping everything for Daredevil this quickly. They were probably just waiting to do this until the strike was over. That was my initial reaction. But I think Vincent D'Onofrio had some good quotes after this news, and I agree with him. I think it's a good cop-out quote for this news, but I think it is true. And he basically said how this happens all the time. I think for TV shows in particular, this happens a lot, particularly with season 1 of things. And I think for creative reboots here, right, switching over from Netflix to Disney, that creative reboot, not just the creative reboot that they're going to do here, but just the switching of studios, helming this project and new people, this was going to be drastically different. And it's normal to say, hey, this wasn't going to work. Let's scratch it, do something new when we still have time. Because Daredevil Born Again wasn't going to come out this year. So we still have time to fix things. And we can makeshift some things. We have a huge disposal of comics to go through, especially with Daredevil. So I don't think this is a problem. I think this is a start of a new path for Disney Plus, for the MCU, and the TV shows. And that kind of I don't want to go into more news that happened before getting your initial reactions, but I think this is a step in the right direction, even though this is sad news at the same time and nerve-wracking news.
So it's sad because these people lost their jobs. Okay. And that's
Exactly.
why when you hear the writers and directors are let go, you are set into a panic, especially when you're coming off a strike and then all these people are now fired. That's not a good look. But in terms of fans, in terms of audience of the MCU, I think overall this is good that they're not going through with the show based on what these reports are saying. I think Kevin Feige used this strike for the actors and the writers to kind of reevaluate what the MCU is doing in terms of Disney Plus. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But I think specifically with Daredevil, a big criticism that people were basically pre-critical of the Daredevil character being absorbed into the overall MCU was, is it going to be inherently the same nature as the Netflix series? And people saw She-Hulk and they were like, wow, I hope it's not like this. There's some good action sequences, but it's still not that PG-13 borderline R type of Daredevil we saw from the Netflix series. We always got confirmations from people like Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio that it's inherently the same. And it clearly wasn't going to be. It clearly wasn't going to be. And it's better not to lie to us, right? Just say we're going to be better. And I got a lot of relief when I saw that Cox wasn't going to appear in costume until episode 4 of Daredevil Born Again. I don't know how true that is from this report, but that would have been awful just because we had to wait in season 1 of Netflix's Daredevil for him to put on the red suit until the very last scene of season
Yeah.
1. And that would be why are we doing this again? They were making a show that was more of a legal procedural show that wasn't action heavy, that wasn't gore, that wasn't violent. And I don't want to see that from Daredevil. I would like to see a combination of the two. And that's something like She-Hulk was heavy, it wasn't very legal
Yeah, not heavy.
procedural accurate, but still like it's a courtroom comedy. That's what it was. I don't think people are looking for that with Daredevil. Yes, he's a lawyer, but let's not make that his entire identity. We want to see him in the red suit. So the fact that they're revamping this, good, and just keep the same cast. Just get the right people on this show, even if you have to bring back some of the Netflix guys. And I saw one of the directors or the showrunner for season 1 of Netflix's Daredevil. He's busy making Amazon shows, and he said he has no desire to come back. And I think that might be the move if you actually did bring him back in some capacity. I know you want to like have a clean slate, but you still want to keep the natural feel of the character. You know what I mean?
Yes. So usually I'm a clean slate guy. We just talked about DC and Momoa and the DCEU Justice League not being a part of the DCU on the last episode of the checkup. But if you're gonna go in this direction, it seems like this show is going to go off of the Netflix show now. The fans on social media are clamoring for it. And Disney, look at Star Wars. They've been approving fan casts and saying, "Hey, you get your Obi-Wan show. You get your Ahsoka show, which was basically Rebels continuation in live action. You're getting Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka. Your fan casts are there. You're getting Charlie Cox back as Daredevil. You're getting Vincent D'Onofrio back as Kingpin. They're doing everything for the fans here, including this. So I think this is the right move, not to." Again, Cox not having or Daredevil not having the suit on until episode 4, that just feels like it would have been another origin story. Born Again literally says another origin or something like that, a new origin.
Soft reboot.
Yeah, so I think here is just like do a soft continuation of the Netflix show, and I wouldn't mind some of the Netflix former backroom writers, showrunner. I know you mentioned he's not interested, but I wouldn't mind it in this specific scenario for them to come back on board if they're gonna go in this direction. But hey, like it's early. The announcement just happened. They haven't hired anyone yet, so who knows what Marvel's gonna do here.
It seems like Marvel, their old mentality seems like they're shifting a little bit. They want to do it their way. Like they don't want to take what Netflix did right. They say, "Hey, we are Marvel. We do it the right way. We have Kevin Feige at the head." They're a little bit stubborn in that regard. So I wouldn't mind it if they just were a little bit more open-minded, bring back what made the other series so effective. You don't have to bring back the entire cast, right? But we have like the characters you're talking about returning, right? The ones we really need with Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock, played by those two actors that are magnificent in the roles, and we have to bring them back because they both appeared in the MCU already. Again, at this point, um, I think this goes into like the next side of this conversation, how the mentality of Marvel is now shifting, and this goes with what I was saying. Like Kevin Feige had time to reevaluate these shows because ultimately, I would say lackluster. Some would argue failing, and that definitely comes after Secret Invasion. These inflated budgets, $200 million plus budgets that have basically matched their movies. And Kevin Feige has, from this report, is shifting from a movie mentality for their TV shows and just making it more naturally TV. And that it could be just having proper showrunners rather than film executives running these TV shows. Uh, Also focusing on building one season after another rather than just saying this is a limited series and now we're going to put them in a movie, right? It seems like everything was building off these shows just to like propel the box office eventually. And I think now they're understanding if we do that and it fails, these characters might never see the big screen. But also, people are saying, yeah, they're just doing this for one season. They have no intention of carrying on and writing these characters season after season. And Loki is the only one that's gotten a season 2. There hasn't even been a green light given to any of these other seasons thus far. And we've had how many so far? Six, I want to say. And we only had
WandaVision, Loki, Secret Invasion, Hawkeye,
Falcon Winter Soldier,
Miss Marvel,
Moon Knight.
Falcon the Winter Soldier, Moon Knight 7.
So none of those have had a season 2 since the birth of the Disney Plus series WandaVision in 2021. So that's
2020, January.
No, 2021. Isn't 2020 the year they had nothing come out? because
You're
2019
right.
was
You're right. You're
ending.
right. You're right. You're right. You're right.
To me, that's just it's smart. It's a TV series. Make it like a TV series. Don't worry about making a TV series that is a movie at the same time. Build it season after season. It may not be what you envisioned on paper, but this is, I think, the most responsible way to go compared to what has failed previously.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to this. Disney Plus, again, Netflix has been around for 2 decades. Disney Plus came out fall 2019, fall, December, something like that, winter. So they were caught up in the streaming wars. They needed to get more quantity. They had to get more shows on Disney Plus, get people to subscribe, try to catch up to Netflix. They thought they could do it with their IP, animation, the whole kids aspect of Disney, and also the MCU and Star Wars. So what were they doing? They were just greenlighting shows and throwing money at it because they had to keep up with Netflix. Because Netflix, again, they freaking have a new movie and show every week. It seemed like at the time. Now it's like crap. We chose quantity over quality. We needed as much stuff on our streaming platform to compete with these other streamers. And now it's come back to bite them because the costs are outrageous. The writer strike clearly shows that they don't need to spend that much, and people care about quality more so than quantity now. And they're cutting because now like people are raising prices on streaming platforms. Not everyone, they have to be more selective. Consumers have to be more selective and what streaming platforms they own and buy. So guess what? Let's just make better stuff. So I think Marvel's finally seeing that. It kind of took this lackluster performance from these shows. I think Secret Invasion was a big eye opener because that
Definitely.
was a huge failure from a watching standpoint. Because when you have a Samuel Jackson and Don Cheadle helming this series and Olivia Colman, and you're getting less than 1 million views in the first week, that's not good. So again, I think efficiency, cutting costs, focusing on quality, and not being so controlling. Because like I think some of these I think we'll get into some of these criticisms are factual and accurate and huge parts of why this has not worked whatsoever versus maybe at a HBO where yeah maybe they upped their max, they added shows to max, but they never lost their core HBO Sunday nights.
Yes, that was the thing. Like the Max originals failed, but they always had HBO as the backbone. You know, and here some of the criticisms that you were previewing. This article talks about a lack of central vision, talks about not giving writers creative oversight. They have a quote unquote fix and post type of attitude. The film execs, as I talked about, are really running the shows rather than having one sole show runner. And we talked about the inflated budgets that are usually $150 million or more. I think the biggest one here is that the MCU, their DNA, like what people came to like know them is that it's all connected and that it feels organized and it's well thought out. In the shows, it doesn't seem very well thought out. And I think the screaming example is Secret Invasion and how that series ended. It seemed like we need to just find an end here. It didn't seem like it had a cohesive vision. And there's a writer, I had his name down here. I'll have to find his name, but he was fired. Uh, I want to say right before they went into post. I think it was Eric Bradstreet. I think his name was, but it just
Bradstreet sounds right.
so I will double check that in one sec. But it just seems like yeah, the showrunners, quote unquote, don't have the control they you would assume they have, right? Because it's the Marvel machine and the film execs get final say. You know, so I think the lack of overall vision is just the shows weren't like the movies and they made them to try and be the movies with these limited type of series rather than embrace the TV of it all. But yeah, your thoughts on that, Ricky Flex? What are the criticisms here that really stand out?
Yeah, for me, it is lacking a central vision and not giving writers creative oversight because I think for a lot of these shows, you see, like, there's not a showrunner, there's not someone that has a vision, you know? It's just like, it feels like, oh, we have to watch this. So before we see the Marvels that come out or miss the Marvels that comes out in November, you know? I think just shows were just lacking that overall theme and why are we watching? It's just like we were watching only because it's the MCU and we need to keep up. Rather than like Loki, you could feel like, all right, Michael Waldron in season 1, Like you could feel the vision behind that and like his overarching theme and goal behind it. And now you're seeing, I think it's Eric Wright, right? That's carrying it over, who was in the writers' room for Michael Waldron. Now he's kind of taken over the Michael Waldron role. You could feel that again here in season 2 already through 2 episodes. So I think those two things, lacking a central vision and not giving kind of the creatives, the power, instead the film executives like a Feige are kind of running the show, that hinders quality. It just always does. And then don't get me started on the fix it.
Lack of trust in creative minds.
Yeah, and again, like you have handcuffs on while trying to do something, right? When you have to use your hands, like that's gonna be hard to do. That's just how it feels. And the fix and post attitude, we haven't even talked about the CGI VFX artists who have been put through the ringer throughout the past few years from these shows and have been through so much. We've talked about the writers and actors strikes so much, like VFX writers who have just formed a union at Marvel. There's going to be a strike there sooner than later, without a doubt. And that's probably the next big domino to fall here in the 21st century in theaters here or whatever, Hollywood. Overall, this rant's going too long. Point is, I definitely think creators' biggest issue that from this like to see this, but also I think that's like the next domino it's going to be with the VFX.
Yeah, so it's the fix and post attitude. I was thinking CGI as well. It's like, okay, this doesn't look good. It's going to look good. Don't worry, we'll fix it. And then you have obviously disgruntled CGI workers, their unionization afterwards. Seeing how they're treated from this point forward will be very interesting, especially with these budgets that are going to be like severely decreased from these previous 6-7 shows that the MCU has put out. And I should mention this report comes from the Hollywood Reporter if you wanted to look at it. And the writer I was talking about, I had their last name right for Secret Invasion. It's Bradstreet, but his first name's Kyle. And he was a writer and executive producer on Mr. Robot. And he was fired by Marvel after having worked on Secret Invasion scripts for a year. And to fit its new direction for the show, Marvel brought in Broken City writer Brian Tucker with directors Thomas Bazooka and great last name and Ali Salim that assisted on the story. So that's just like too many hands on deck that don't have the same vision, especially if you fire a writer after working on a script for a year that you're using and then you're making tweaks to it. That's just going to lead to potentially a non-cohesive story. That just falls directly on what we're talking about.
Yeah, a non-cohesive story. And like, what if we talked about like major criticisms of the MCU? It's how it's these shows, I should say. They're predictable. They feel formulaic. And when you're plugging and playing writers and creators here, if they're not attached to the story from the start and throughout and have a vision, then yeah, it's gonna feel formulaic because they're trying to like put pieces together like a math formula or something. So it just makes sense why the product has been what it's been, like quality wise, and not very good and not very inventive or innovative.
I wonder also what this means for like what type of shows the MCU is going to green light in the future, where it's going to be probably lesser known heroes and also lesser known stars if we're going to see season after season of the same character. Like we're not going to see, I would be shocked if we got Moon Knight season 2 following this report. Seeing Oscar Isaac in season 2 and season 3 of Moon Knight, I don't think it's going to happen. I think that kind of it's gone. I think that idea, like the idea of seeing him in another season of Moon Knight, I think we see him in a movie eventually, but I don't think he's gonna be in season after season of the show. Like Miss Marvel, I could see that show continuing despite its lackluster viewership because I think they can make it very inexpensively. And you have Iman Vellani trying to build up her star appeal. I could see that show happening. She-Hulk, Tatiana Maslany, as divisive as that show is, maybe they get it worked with some people, definitely got eyeballs on that show, and a lot of people discussed it online. I could see like that being a continued show. I don't think we're going to get Sebastian Stan and Anthony Mackie in this season 2 of Falcon the Winter Soldier. I think those days are over.
Yeah.
Right. It is going to be a movie, obviously, with Captain America 4 and then Thunderbolts with Sebastian Stan. Those days, I think, are out the window now.
To interject here, I think you're right. Those days are over where we have these big movie stars or big like box office successes transfer to a TV show and then go back. I think those days are over. Trying to kind of piece together this franchise, the MCU through multiple different ways. I think that's over because it just costs way too much
Take
money.
the stakes down of the show.
Yeah, so I think that's over here. But I am going to disagree with you. I'm not going to say those shows are going to get season 2 and 3. I can see Miss Marvel, particularly if this movie's successful and she's successful. But She-Hulk, I don't know. I think you got to just scrap and try something new.
Yeah,
I'm not saying scrap the character, but I just don't see her getting a second season out of that. Clearly, they're doing this for a reason. They're doing it because that's one of the shows that's been unsuccessful.
yeah. I think to me, it's like the Secret Invasion, like having like those high stakes of that show, and Samuel L. Jackson and Don Cheadle in your show, and Olivia Colman, and to see it perform so lackluster, I guess it's not as big of a deal if Miss Marvel doesn't perform as well, or She-Hulk. It's like, and like with those actors that just really, you can't expect them to carry a movie, you know.
Yeah,
And some
but
people did enjoy
Mhm.
those shows. And I didn't watch Miss Marvel. I didn't necessarily enjoy She-Hulk. I didn't enjoy She-Hulk. I'll admit it. But like I'm just saying those are TV actors in my eyes.
Yeah,
They're not enough to carry a movie.
completely agree with you. What I'm saying is, by this news today, no visions, writers not getting not giving like the proper work time, the execs running the show basically. We're having issues with fix it in post that you mentioned, and these huge budgets. All these shows, including the ones that we mentioned, like especially She-Hulk, like if that didn't have a vision, then why would we have a season 2 for a show that didn't have a vision? Why would we give a season 2 where
I think She-Hulk had a vision. It's just people didn't like that.
did it though? Like you want to
Well,
say yes.
it had a very
You want to say
specific
the
tone.
W word, but I'm going to
No, no,
say
no, no. I don't.
there's
I
a
don't.
lot of like if your vision is all these cameos from Daredevil and Abomination, I don't think that's a vision.
It had
And
a very specific tone compared to all the other shows.
I agree, but I don't know. I'm just saying that was just one example. I just think overall, there's a reason why this is happening. Like the shows that are unsuccessful so far. Yes, of course, every show's gonna have some fans, but there's a reason why this news is coming out, and we're saying, oh, shows going forward, we're gonna change this. So why would we go back to the well of shows that weren't successful? Is basically what I'm saying. I'm not saying it won't happen. I just think it's kind of hypocritical a little bit.
Yeah, I guess we're jumping ahead, thinking about what shows are going to be greenlit or not. I'll take the onus on that for bringing that up because we're predicting
That's what
way
we
too
do.
far in the future. Daredevil Born Again, though, good idea to reset it. I feel bad for the writers and directors who are now out, and I hope they get work soon. All right, difficult time in Hollywood.